Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 68 of 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's tip comes to us from special guest Melanie Childers. Raise your energy by running in place.
One of the tips that I like to use actually comes from one of my acting coaches from years ago. And the thing that she would have us do is raise your energy so that you are very visible and very powerful. And so what that looks like is if you are scared and nervous, your energy is very small. You're very in your head and very focused on what you're going to say. And so when you raise your energy and imagine that you can project your whole being into the entire room, you take up more space and you become more visible and more interesting and more present. And so what she would have us do is run in place for about 30 seconds to wear us out a little bit, but also get us in our bodies. And then you just become more present and more powerful when you're present in that space. So my tip is to raise your energy and to practice doing that. And I imagine that you're Lady Gaga. Imagine that you're Freddie Mercury. Own that space with every fiber of your being and practice in that space.
Stick around. And after the break, Melanie and I are going to talk more about speaking, confidence, mindset, her experience as a coach, and much more. Welcome back. This week, I am joined by Melanie Childers. Melanie is a political consultant, a master confidence and leadership coach, an activist, a yogi, a writer, an educator, and really an all-around badass. She specializes in coaching progressive women activists and candidates by showing them how to build confidence, manage stress, and lead with integrity. She's taught these concepts at a variety of places, including Vote Run Lead, Netroots Nation, Rep GA, and Pave It Blue. She's impacting the world by coaching those who actively work to make the world a better place. This powerful purpose is what drives her to revolutionize lives so that collectively we can all build a more loving, inclusive, and progressive society. When not coaching, Melanie can be found perfecting her handstand, reading one of the 10 books on her bedside table, or funding her shoe habit. I first encountered Melanie when she appeared on Lynn Henderson's Inside Knowledge podcast talking all about resilience, actually just a few episodes after I was on that same show. I thought it was a great discussion, so I invited her to join us here on 2-Minute Talk Tips. The Inside Knowledge podcast is another great one to check out. You can find links to those episodes over at 2minutetalktips.com/Melanie. I enjoyed the chat with Melanie, and it got surprisingly deep. We talked about speaking, of course, but we also talked a lot about mindset. I found that most of the guests that I talk to these days often end up talking about mindset because the right mindset makes the difference in applying the speaking techniques that I often talk about. We went well beyond that, though. We talked about Melanie's struggles with cancer, the nature of depression, and even touched on the topic of suicide a little bit. See, ultimately, success in speaking is about learning to be your authentic self, regardless of the topic you're speaking about. Because when you are your authentic self, ironically, it's not about you. It's about your message and getting out of the way of your message so that it can shine through. So let's meet Melanie. So welcome to 2-Minute Talk Tips, Melanie. I'm thrilled you could join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here with you.
How did you get into public speaking?
Well, I kind of backed into it. I started with acting as a middle school, high schooler. And then in 2011, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 34 and became an advocate for survivors because I realized that the narrative that you hear that's like, rah, rah, you're a warrior, you got this, you're the bravest person I know, you can do this, was kind of not the reality behind what's going on. You're terrified. You don't really have a choice but to undergo all of these treatments and to show up as, this fighter person. And you don't always feel that way. And so I became very vocal about the realities behind breast cancer and started a blog and started really talking about it. And eventually started an online magazine with some of my survivor friends called theunderbelly.org. And we still run that on the side now. And we talk a lot about what it's really like. It's not this pink ribbon. It's not all cheerleading. There are some real harsh realities, but we approach it in a way that's digestible and not terrifying. But really, my speaking and my advocacy started there.
What I think is really interesting about that, well, among other things, is you raise the point that, when people think it's the rah-rah, the heroic type of thing, and you're so brave for going through this. And I've, longtime listeners know that I am a stroke survivor of just about a year now. And wow. I hear, some of those same things. And I'm always very appreciative of people who say that. But it's one of those things where I look at it, I'm like, I didn't choose this. I wasn't brave. It was, survive this or not, get better, do what you have to recover, or you're not. You don't have a choice unless you want to, if you want to go on living and do something else. And it just seems like the natural outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very easy. I think the things that people say from the outside like that, the whole, you've got this, you can do this. It's encouraging and it's kind and it's nice. And I always appreciate that, but it's ultimately to make them feel better. Because they're saying something, they feel like they're encouraging, they're doing something, but at the end of the day, it makes them feel better. Right?
Sure. And, and that's the thing, reaching out and working with folks, ultimately it can make everybody feel better, but it becomes very interesting as, people also start sort of questioning their own mortality when they see you dealing with these things.
Right. And I sort of used my cancer experience as a social studies experiment. I just sort of took note of, how do people treat me now? How do they respond to me? Is this weird to them? Do they feel like I have cooties and it's contagious? Or are they fascinated? Are they getting closer? Are they moving farther away? So yeah, it was a very interesting study in who your friends really are and who shows up for you.
Yeah, exactly. So as you're going through this and building out this online magazine and all these tools and getting into the speaking that way, how did you make the move from focusing on talking about the reality around surviving cancer to getting into political and advocacy coaching?
I learned about coaching because I was in a place that I was suicidal. I had cancer sort of makes you lose everything in a lot of different ways. So I'd gone bankrupt, experienced foreclosure, lost my car, lost my house, ended up getting a divorce. And so I was in a very, very bad place. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to pull on my resiliency boots and try to figure out how to move forward, because this is not the path I want to take. I have things to offer. I have important things to say, and I want to stay here. So I was desperately searching for tools to help me do that. And I found life coaching, and it literally saved my life. And so once I went through that program, I started applying it to, okay, well, who can I best help? And I, was looking back on my experience. I'm like, well, okay, I know, my hell and back is breast cancer. So let me reach out to my breast cancer friends and see if I can help them find their footing after diagnosis. And then the 2016 election happened, and I realized the shock and the trauma that so many of my friends and people around the country are going through right now is not different from a cancer diagnosis. The shock and the trauma of it all is very similar. And so I realized, oh my gosh, all of these people really need my help too. How can I help them? And politics was something that I was already really passionate about. And I was like, what am I talking about the most? Oh my God, it's politics. Oh my God, everyone around me is freaking out. I have tools to help. Let me offer my services. So I just kind of eased into it that way. And it absolutely lights me up and gives me life every single day. I love it. I wouldn't do anything else.
That's really interesting to see that that parallel there between the reaction to cancer and the reaction to the election. And what I think is also really interesting there is that you're already able to take the life coaching, and where it really then becomes successful and inspires your passion is when you get more focused on it and when you get more niche on it in choosing this segment of how you can focus and how you can be more powerful. I was just talking in the last week's episode about, how just limiting what we're talking about in a presentation lets us go deeper and lets it be more memorable and effective and fulfilling.
I completely agree because, and this is a thing that I help people with too, is like when you narrow down on what are the things that really light you up, what are the things that make you really, really passionate and excited to talk about, that you could talk about all day long, that's the thing you need to be focused on. That's the thing that you need to tap into, especially if you're going to go speak about it. And when you focus specifically on that thing, you come from this incredible place of power that you might not have if, you're talking about numbers and numbers aren't your thing.
So as you've done this work and worked with politicians and other folks who are working in that space, what do you generally need to coach them to do differently than, say, you might coach a corporate speaker? What do they need to be prepared for or do differently to be successful than non-political or advocacy speakers?
Well, I think at its core, these tools and the things that, any public speaker comes across are basically the same. You struggle with confidence. You might struggle with your inner critic, the inner voice that tells you that you suck and you're no good at this and everyone hates you. And being authentic, speaking from passion, and managing your mindset so that you're not nervous, so that you translate that nervousness into excitement. But of course, the things that political speakers tend to struggle the most with is criticism from the outside. So if you're in the corporate world and you're presenting some numbers or, whatever your PowerPoint is, whatever your presentation is, you're probably not going to get as intense a pushback as you would if you were in the political arena, which is why a lot of people are terrified of running for office, because the vitriol can be very loud.
Nobody has ever thrown a shoe at me during a product presentation.
Exactly. You don't usually get booed or yelled at.
Usually.
Normally, right.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a very sort of different focus there. The other thing I think is really interesting that you said there is that sort of the general public zeitgeist is the idea of politicians or political speak having to be authentic. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and how authenticity plays into what a politician needs to do when speaking, or an aspiring politician needs to do when speaking.
Well, this is the thing that I really focus on with my candidate clients, because I believe that one of the things that people hate the most about politics is the disingenuousness that seems to come across, that you're saying one thing to one group of people and another thing to another group of people. People in general tend not to like that. They want you to be real. Right. And why did people vote for George Bush? Because they felt like they could sit down and have a beer with him. They felt like he was a real person. Why didn't people vote for Mitt Romney? Because he's kind of robotic. Nobody wants to vote for a robot. They just don't. And so being able to, and to go back to that, Hillary Clinton struggled with that problem.
Sure.
It's a delicate balance for women to find to come from the place of, yes, I know all the policy. Yes, I'm brilliant, but I'm also warm and I'm approachable and I'm a real person. That's a really hard balance to strike, to balance that warmth. And so coming from this place of authenticity is what I focus a lot with my clients on, is that you have to be a real person. Your story matters because it makes you relatable, especially if you've struggled. So many people want to be like, oh no, I've done X, Y, and Z and I've never had a problem in my life. Look at how awesome I am. It's like, no, that's not relatable. You have to be relatable so that people know, oh, you get it. You have student debt like I do, or you went bankrupt like I did, or maybe you've struggled with anxiety or depression. Oh my gosh, me too. And so being able to speak from and present yourself as I am this authentic person is way more valuable than I think some people give it credit for. And that's a thing that you learn in acting too. Like, yes, you're putting on this role, right? But you're also yourself if this situation were happening to you. So it's similar, but a little bit different.
The other nice thing about authenticity, too, is it becomes a lot easier to keep track of your stories and the things you've told other people as well when, the truth is a lot easier to just stay on top of.
It certainly is.
So you mentioned one of the challenges with women in balancing warmth and knowing the policy and all of those and those types of things. What challenges have you found that women face in this environment in being a speaker that may be different from the challenges that men face?
There are, I think, a lot of different struggles that women face versus men, especially when women are becoming more and more visible, whether they're becoming public personas, whether they're trying to rise up in the ranks corporately, wherever they're trying to show up in a bigger, more important role. We struggle with this very fine tightrope walk of sorts between you can't be too assertive, but you can't be too nice. And you can't be too smart, but you can't be dumb either. And so trying to balance this strength and warmth is definitely a challenge, I think. And that's where I go back to the authenticity, is that if you are grounded in yourself and you know yourself really well and you are coming from this place of power in your presence, you're better able to walk that line.
And you don't see men having the same challenges?
I really don't.
Okay.
I worked in the corporate sphere for a while, and so I have seen that it's just a different way. Men can be silly and still get promoted. They can be not as intelligent and still get promoted. They can not work as hard. And confidence balances those things out. And so if men are projecting this huge confidence, and this is just from my experience, what I've seen, if men are projecting this confidence, but they aren't necessarily working hard, they're more likely to get promoted. Whereas women, we tend to put our heads down and think that our hard work is going to get noticed, where no, we actually have to speak up and be more confident and show that a little bit more and just represent that a little bit better, because the people who are going to promote you are not necessarily looking at, are you busting your butt every day? They need to see that you believe in yourself too. And I think that men just do a better job with that.
That certainly seems like it would translate very easily into the political sphere as well, in terms of being an advantage and being something to overcome and deal with.
Absolutely. And so many women are afraid to step up and run for many reasons. And criticism is one of them. Personal attacks on their families is a big one. And yeah, it just takes this willingness to step outside your comfort zone. And humans are just terrified of that in general. But it's a little bit harder for women. We suffer much more personal attack when that happens. So yeah, it's just, you have to work on the mindset that I'm going to do this. And sometimes it's going to be awful and sometimes it's going to be great, but I have to do it. It's so important. And that's where going back to your why is so valuable, because you can take the focus off of you and put it onto what you're fighting for.
I often, tell folks who express, fear of public speaking is that why is what matters, because it's not about you. It's about your story. It's about your goal. It's about your message. Now, in the case of politics, I mentioned, it is a little different. It is a little bit more about you, since it's about a question of, are people going to choose you when they get to the polls, as opposed to adopting a policy or something along those lines.
Sure. And it's very easy to make it about you, especially if you lose. But not a lot of times it's not about you. And to me, when you take the focus, your internal focus off of you, and you put it on the things that you're passionate about and the things that you're fighting for, you are much more inspired and much more likely to put yourself out there. versus if you make it an ego thing. And again, that to me is a difference between men and women. Men run because they want to be elected. Women tend to run for causes. So just that mental mindset shift is so different too. It's very fascinating to me.
That is fascinating. And that then probably also makes it a little bit easier to bounce back as well if things don't go well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's much, much easier to not take it personally if you've made it about the campaign and you've made the campaign about what you're fighting for and not necessarily about you.
So what is the most important thing that your students need to learn?
Wow. For me, for my clients, it's really about shifting their mindset. That is what I focus probably 90% of my work on, is changing the way that they view themselves and think about themselves, because our brains are wired. I don't know how much you know about neurology, but
over the past year, I have learned way more about neurology, anatomy, and neuroplasticity than any marketing guy should ever know.
Yes, I am completely with you. This whole neuroplasticity fires me up and excites me, and I'm totally fascinated. I'm right there with you. So then you know that the way that you think about something leads to other thoughts, which leads to other thoughts. And so like you create this neural pathway in your mind. And what they say in neuroplasticity is what wires together, fires together, right?
Exactly.
So if you can shift from one thought instead of automatically going to the next, if you can shift to another better feeling thought, especially if that first thought is going to take you down a rabbit hole of sadness and depression and despair, if you can catch that thought earlier and shift it to something that feels more neutral or just a little bit better. An example that I use is I have a client who public speaking. She struggles with public speaking, and she goes to these events and she's, her brain is already in, I'm scared, I'm freaking out. Oh my God, this is going to go terribly. I'm so nervous. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to forget everything when I get up there. It's like, okay, well, let's back up, because this is the train of thought that you always go down. So if we back up to, oh my God, I'm scared, and shift that to, maybe I'll be okay. Something that just feels a little bit better than, oh my God, I'm scared. Because physically, what's happening with your body reacts to fear and excitement the same way. And so if you can change your mind just a little bit from I'm scared to this is going to be okay. I have something really important to say. People need to hear this. I'm going to be helping them. So instead of, oh my God, I'm scared. Oh my God, this is going to go terribly. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. If you can shift that train, just like move those train tracks onto something more excitement oriented, your brain is going to light up in that way. And it takes some time, but that is the number one thing that I work with my clients on, is shifting that mindset from I'm scared, or I'm an awful person, or nobody likes me, to something a little bit more neutral, so that we can start moving toward the positive ways that you want to feel and the ways that you do want to show up in the world.
One of the things I found, as I've explored neuroplasticity and all this fun stuff even more, is you talk about going down these paths. And what I think of it as is, the brain is sort of made up of a series of dirt roads. And the more you go down a path, the deeper you build the wheel ruts in that road.
Yes.
And if it's a good destination you're going to build those wheel ruts again and again and again, and it's going to be easier to get to that great place. If instead you keep going to a negative place or a bad place, you know what? It's going to get easier and easier to go to that bad place.
Absolutely. And that's really what I learned going through my coaching program, because my brain was going to the suicidal path and I was stopping it and going, no, I don't really want to do that. We need to find another answer. And so I was able to back up those thoughts along that rut, right, in the road, and start taking a different path, so that, every now and then those will still pop up, but I'm able to go, excuse you, where did you come from? No, we're on this path. Get back on this path.
Right. Of the various things you work with your students on, is there anything they tend to be more reluctant to learn or reluctant to implement or engage with?
I haven't discovered a whole lot of reluctance. It's more fear. And it's really fear of dealing with our own minds and with our own inner critics, because that voice can be so loud and so mean, and we identify with it so much that starts to feel like reality. We believe it. We believe that all the bad things that it says about us are true. And sitting down with that voice and learning to hear what it has to say and love it basically into submission so that it becomes your ally and not your critic anymore is challenging, because we have to look at the hard stuff. We have to look at how mean we are to ourselves. And that ultimately, I think, is the biggest fear that people have. It's not so much what other people are going to say. It's what am I going to say to myself if I mess this up, if I'm a failure, if whatever happens. What am I going to say to myself is what hurts more, I believe.
The inner critic is the companion that is with us throughout our entire lives, longer than anybody else, and everybody has it, and everybody is hearing that voice as well of their own inner critic. It's not like you're the only one.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say that this is the voice that people try to escape through various means, whether it's alcohol or food or exercise for exercise addicts or, suicide, if we're going to, recent news, right? This is the voice that people are trying to escape. And the truth is, and I hope that your audience knows this already, but if they don't, this voice is not you. It's not. You are the person who's hearing that voice. You are the person who can separate yourself and see, oh, that's not me. You're the one who's listening to it. You are not it. And so you don't have to identify with it. You can help it shift, and you can love it and make it your ally instead of this mean, awful part of you. It takes time and it takes a lot of practice, but it is possible.
Will Wheaton wrote a blog post a while back about his depression. And for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with Will Wheaton, he's probably best known as Wesley Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation. He was also in the classic movie Stand By Me, and has since made a career as a writer and blogger and voiceover actor and doing all sorts of incredible things. But he also deals with chronic depression. And what was really interesting in reading his stuff is he just keeps coming back to the one phrase that depression lies. Part of you is telling you things. It's, when that inner critic gets too severe, it's not telling you the truth. It's lying to you. It's giving you false information. And we get into trouble when we start taking that false information and start accepting those lies as truth, and they're not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it's one of those brain rut conversations, right? It's that one tiny thing can happen and your brain goes down this rabbit hole of negativity and hate and anger and frustration and whatever it is for you. And the way out of that is to start moving toward a more neutral thought. So if you're stuck in this, rabbit hole of I hate myself, a more neutral thought might be, I'm a human being, or I'm okay. So you can't go from I hate myself to I'm freaking awesome, because your brain doesn't believe that. Your brain believes I hate myself. And yeah, God, depression is such a liar.
And we've certainly gone a very deep way, different from just talking about improving your rhetoric. But all of this ties in because, when we talk about authenticity, when we talk about being yourself and putting yourself out there and having the confidence, all of this ties together into that one big bundle.
It really does. And again, like that is why I was able to go from helping breast cancer survivors to helping people who have been affected by the election in a negative way, because it's very similar, and the ways that our brain works are pretty universal, and for most people.
So, with that in mind, who should work with you? Who should look at hiring you to be their coach and learn more from your services and programs?
I tend to work with progressive women who are either on the forefront of political, cultural, or business movements, or who want to be. They tend to be the ones who seek me out, who say, oh my gosh, nobody knows that I'm really struggling and I can't tell anybody else, and will you work with me? And so, of course, I'm like, yes, you have something really, really important to say. You can't be sitting on the sidelines. Get up. We got to do this. So ultimately, yeah, it's women who want to stand up, have their voice heard, take the lead, and change the world. And I call myself a world changer for world changers, because those are the people who tend to come to me.
Awesome. And what I think is interesting there too is that it's not just, we've talked a lot about folks who are running for office or politicians, but that's not the only way to go ahead and change the world. And, there's opportunities in corporate leadership and in other realms as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this is a really important time for women in every sphere to be standing up and, taking the lead and showing up and running for more, whether that's for office or for more money or for a better position. We have been, in the minority for way too long. We can change that. We have the power. And I think so many women are recognizing that, oh, actually, I've been playing it very safe. You don't have to. You can have whatever you want right now. Go get it.
It's all about, some unleashing that inner voice, and through the power of public speaking, unleashing that outer voice as well.
Absolutely.
So if folks want to learn more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
Sure. My website is theenlightenedbadass.com. And I'm also on Facebook at The Enlightened Badass and on Instagram at The Enlightened Badass.
That is some fantastic branding.
Well, I try to incorporate, some of my woo a little bit, with also really practical, scientific, grounded information and tactics, and a little bit of sass.
All of those links will also be available at over at 2minutetalktips.com. So, Melanie, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I just want to say that I adore what you're doing, and thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
So that's it for this week. What are your thoughts on running for office or otherwise speaking up to change the world? Let us know over at 2minutetalktips.com/Melanie. Be sure to check out Melanie's website and services. She's at theenlightenedbadass.com, or just go to 2minutetalktips.com/Melanie for that link and many more. Do you know someone who might benefit from this episode or find it interesting? Share it with them. Tell them to head on over to 2minutetalktips.com/Melanie to listen and to subscribe in their favorite podcast app. Work to raise your energy before your next talk. And, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
2 Minute Talk Tips is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.